Hello, 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 and welcome to another edition of Heavy Hands. I am your host, Connery Bush, and with me as always is Phil McKenzie. Phil, what a lovely day it is. We get a break in the UFC schedule. A break!
Hope you're ready for the Depressed Us tomorrow.
I'm so very ready for the Depressed Us, yes. I'm very ready for that. Honestly, a little torture is better than, it's different torture. That's all I really care about at a certain point. And
that's what characterizes breaks. A little light flagellation.
And, it's really, really good timing for a break because that gives us extra time to talk about all the fights set for the stacked Rosenstruik versus Sakai card happening.
Oh, hell yeah.
On June 5th. No, just kidding. It was funny, Phil. The other day we were trying to, cause we're going to be recording some things a little out of our usual schedule to work around, some predetermined plans. And, we spent 5 minutes trying to wrap our heads around what was happening with the schedule. Because we're so unaccustomed to getting any gaps. We're like, wait, which thing we're previewing this, or it took us ages to figure out that, June 3rd, falls before June 5th, but not before, the 29th or whatever it is. It was very perplexing, but now that it's settled in, it's sunk in. I'm really glad to be here. In this place, this wonderful gap between events, we've got a topic planned for you. Later in the episode, we are going to talk about trends, technique trends to be specific in MMA. And that may expand into, strategic trends as well, metagame trends, if you will. But, Phil, people have been praising me as a prophet. And with good reason, because I was the only person on Earth who a couple weeks ago had the foresight to say, hey, everyone's doing calf kicks. Soon we're going to start to see people breaking their legs a lot as people realize they can just check them. And, friend of every MMA podcast in the world, Caposa, said he's seen 5 legs break in the past month. That does not feel like an overestimation. It has been a sudden glut of horrific lower limb violence. And so what a wonderful occasion to celebrate me first and foremost, but also to talk about some of the more persistent trends in MMA and how they were eventually undone. Usually not as horrifically as the calf kicks are now being undone, but that's what we're going to do later on. Before that, Font versus Garbrandt happened last weekend, and several other fights were on its undercard, and we are going to talk about them. So, I feel like I've been talking too long already, Phil. Why don't you introduce us to the main event of last weekend's card, which was Rob Font versus Cody Garbrandt.
This was one where we were pretty split on how it was going to go.
Yeah.
Despite the fact that we were both like, we reckon Rob Font's probably going to win this in the end.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that was probably relatively common amongst analysts. I think that was the general take.
Mm-hmm.
Because, everyone had seen Rob Font lose a similar fight to this, but then again, no one was really trusting Cody Garbrandt much.
Right.
And in the end, it wasn't close at all.
No. It wasn't.
Aside from on one crazy judge's scorecard.
Oh my God.
Who managed to give Cody Garbrandt 2 rounds. This was pretty much a one-sided drubbing. And I guess the thing to do now is, as always, is to cut it up into and apportion, if not blame, then responsibility. How much is this Rob Font looking good?
Mm-hmm.
I think it's a reasonable amount. How much of this is Cody Garbrandt's inbuilt technical flaws? That's also there.
Mm-hmm.
how much of it is Cody Garbrandt looking regressed? I think that's also probably present in this.
Yeah.
Do you agree?
I think I do. People were jumping to all of the fighter comparisons on Twitter, over Sunday and Monday after the event. And of course the one I thought of right off the bat, and we'll get into why in a moment, was pre 145 Edson Barboza, who, like Cody Garbrandt now, was molded largely by Mark Henry. And perhaps it does kind of raise the question. I have accredited Barboza's new resistance to pressure to his drop in weight, and I do think it's made an obvious change in attitude. It may also have something to do with the fact that he's no longer a Mark Henry fighter. Mm-hmm. Who knows? So I was immediately thinking, Cody Garbrandt has gotten stuck in Gallup mode. He's becoming Barboza. It's a Mark Henry flaw. Other people were making the decidedly less flattering comparison, though, of Tyron Woodley. And I think that's a bit much. Tyron Woodley is...
But not entirely without merit.
Not entirely without merit, particularly pertaining to the right hand that knocked out Rafael Assunção, which Cody Garbrandt looked for about a dozen times in this fight. Exact same setup. And the thing about setups, Phil, is once it doesn't work like 3 times, it's no longer a setup to the thing you're trying to do. It's now just like an opportunity for the opponent to try to figure out what they can do to you while you think you're setting shit up. Cody Garbrandt was in that territory, so I can see, a man backing into the fence and repeatedly trying the exact same obvious setup for a single big bomb of a right hand. It's not, unreasonable to compare that a little bit to Tyron Woodley.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think the Mark Henry criticism is, unfortunately, because I do like Mark Henry. Mm-hmm. I do think it's kind of valid. I think he is someone who, from his corner work, you could hear him telling Garbrandt to do the right things, to come forward and hit the body and so on. But he does seem to train people who, have a tendency to, what's the right word for this? Just to look for make the perfect be the enemy of the good, to have a strategy that will allow you to never get into trouble, which is mainly to maintain your perfect, try and, keep retreating until you get your perfect distance.
Yeah.
It does seem to be a really common trait amongst his fighters.
Mm-hmm. I wonder if this is, this has something to do with the fact that Mark Henry, while he obviously specializes in boxing, I don't believe, I interviewed him once before. I don't, and he talked about this. I don't believe, so someone is going to remember this better than me and correct me, and I welcome that. But I do not believe I recall him having been a boxing coach or a coach of any kind before meeting Frankie Edgar. That was the start of his career, was coaching Frankie Edgar and molding him. And obviously, that deserves tremendous respect because he did an amazing job with Frankie and so many other fighters.
Mm-hmm.
But, I wonder if it's maybe tied to the fact that he came up as a coach doing boxing for the big wide open cage. And maybe that, led to a greater emphasis on just endless evasive footwork that never leads to anything, simply because the cage gives you so much more room to run around in and so few tight corners compared to a boxing ring. I don't know. But yeah, it does seem like maybe it's a Mark Henry thing. I think it's also a Cody Garbrandt thing, though.
Yes.
I think one thing we talked about last week, Phil, was the differences between Rob Font and Dominic Cruz as come forward fighters. The differences are great. And I think we saw here very clearly how much Cody Garbrandt needs his opponent, Cody Garbrandt as a counterpuncher, and that is 100% the thing he does most naturally, the thing he defaults to. with or without Mark Henry. It showed how much he needs the opponent to show him the gaps.
Yes. Because
he does not create any, what you might call wedges of his own at all. There were moments, of course, he would come out of the corner. And again, credit to Mark Henry because he was clearly telling Cody the right things. Like at the beginning of round 3, Garbrandt was getting on his jab. He was feinting. He was countering in more combinations for like a minute. And then he defaulted to being Cody Garbrandt again. And what that means is, making no effort to claim the initiative. You know, Michael Bisping was asking for him to go forward. I think that would have been a great idea to at least stand his ground, and if not, back Font up. But, even if he's off the back foot, he needed the initiative, and he didn't have the initiative. Rob Font was in the driver's seat the whole damn fight. The feints, the jabs, the pressuring footwork, the counters, every single thing was done on his terms because he wanted it to be done that way. There were very few surprises for Rob Font in this entire fight, which is really impressive, you know, because as open as Garbrandt left it for him, it's still a man with big power, incredibly fast hands, much better than average defense, better than average footwork. All these things in Cody Garbrandt's corner, and Font just led him around by the nose, basically.
Hmm.
Yeah.
So I was thinking about this in, and I totally agree with all of that. I think that I do think that Garbrandt for his part has unfortunately gotten to a bit of a Woodley point where I think he's trained himself out of getting into insane exchanges so much.
Yeah.
That he's trained himself out of getting into exchanges.
Yep. The anxiety he now has the anxiety in common with Tyron Woodley.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I think that 5th round, whilst I obviously didn't give it to him, was at least sort of what I would have expected from Cody Garbrandt.
Yeah.
Coming into the fight, not necessarily just the circling around the cage looking for trying to low kick Font's jab, and then we also saw that just lost confidence in doing that.
Mm-hmm.
Once he got countered on it once or twice, he refused to go back to the leg kick much.
Yeah.
But we saw that in the 5th round he was willing to come forward, throw the old 3-2, show a bit of the old Cody Garbrandt, and it was obviously far too little, far too late at this point, and he was still technically outgunned. But one of the things I was thinking about from Rob Font's end is how is this different to the Assunção fight? Because Assunção is also someone who will not throw very much. He's got less hand speed than Garbrandt. He's got less power than Garbrandt, and he still won that fight 30-27.
Mm-hmm.
And I was wondering whether it was in the gradation of power from Font, because one of the things he did a lot was just made Garbrandt so uncomfortable, was just chasing around the cage and just touching him with the jab. Yeah. Admittedly, Rob Font's hands are the size of bowling balls. There's a limited amount to which he can just touch people. It must hurt whenever he touches anyone. But
all the more reason to just touch people.
Yeah.
You're throwing bowling balls around. You only have to toss them for the other person to feel to feel it.
I think that is true. That there's part of that, but he did that a lot against Assunção.
Mm-hmm.
I think the differences, between this fight and that fight are, firstly, that Assunção was end fighting a bunch with Font. So I think there's two things that are different that Garbrandt didn't do that Assunção did, and one of them is on Assunção's part, is that he hand fought with Font a lot. He was constantly tapping his hand, making sure he knew exactly where Font was, so that he could use Font's jab and hand as much of a measuring stick as Font was using.
Yep.
And he was just obscuring where it was going to go. Whereas Garbrandt was pretty much just trying to avoid it with head movement, which as we've seen even if you're Jose Aldo,
Yep.
you can't do that. It's impossible. It's just not biomechanically feasible.
And again, head movement, not prompted by his own initiative.
Yeah.
That's the real problem. You could get by on just head movement, or a large part of head movement, if you're doing something to ensure you know what's coming and when.
Mm-hmm.
But as a purely reactive thing, no. Suicidal. I mean, it's honestly remarkable that he did survive. I know it's going to be pat and everyone will be saying, wow, Cody Garbrandt's chin. But, he does seem to have seriously addressed that issue, just by not exchanging. Although again, Tyron Woodley territory. Sorry, your second point.
Font has become much better at feinting.
Yes.
And that might be, because I think might be partially because Assunção wasn't there, he wasn't getting hand fought and he had a better understanding of where his range was, but really much more shoulder feints, much more like feinting with his hip and stepping inside.
Every kind. Yeah.
And then being able to just jab and double jab. And, so yeah, we mentioned a bit last week, I can't remember whether this was a Patreon episode, about how you can, happens to fighters when feints as their first layer of offense aren't there for them. That was the Schnell against what's his face?
Bontorin.
Bontorin fight, yes.
Yeah.
But Font was able to, feed Garbrandt a steady diet of feints in a way which he just really didn't do against Assunção.
Mm-hmm. And Font did what Schnell should have done, which is used whatever information those feints garnered. Sometimes Garbrandt didn't react, and then he just did a thing. It's like, okay, he's not going to react to me moving, and I'm in range. Just time to touch him. Then he'll react, and then I can touch him with something bigger. He did that over and over again. And then there were other times where he did get Cody to swat at a punch that wasn't there, and then fired a punch that played off of that reaction immediately after. I totally agree. I would add to that, comparing the Font's fight with Assunção to this, similar kind of dynamics, and what was the difference? Assunção, part and parcel of all his hand fighting, was, he actually did stand his ground. So I think that also hampered some of Font's feinting, and Font's confidence. He wasn't just able to run somebody backwards simply by stepping forward and then play guessing games with just anticipating their next position. The other thing was that, Assunção himself, way more feints. Honestly, Rafael Assunção's worst feinting performance is probably his fight with Cody Garbrandt, where he got nuked trying to just nakedly time a counterpunch. But typically,
also one last thing.
Yeah.
When Assunção went for a reactive double leg against Rob Font, he had Rafael Assunção's game.
Right. That helped. That helped too. Yeah, it was actually impactful when he would get him down. Yeah, so I think both of those things contribute to the difference we saw here. But I'm glad you mentioned Font's feints. They were such a huge part of this fight to me. This was a rhythm fight. This was like a dance contest, basically. Font played so many games with rhythm. One of his most consistent tricks, I love this. I did a whole video about this kind of combination, called Gennady Golovkin leading the dance, which, I'm still very proud of. I think it's a very solid video. Here, Rob Font did a lot of 1-1-2s, jab, jab, cross, but a particular kind of 1-1-2 where it was more of a 1 feint 2. And, or another way to put that in rhythmic terms would be to say it was a whole, half whole kind of attack. Whole beat, half beat, whole beat, where he would reach him with the 1 and the 2 were just nice, aimed power punches, let's say, like the ones Gaethje was hitting, Tony Ferguson with, thrown deliberately, targeted, Not particularly fast, not slow and too loaded up, but targeted, deliberate punches, that come on a kind of predictable tempo. But the feint in between fucks everything up for the guy who is, foolish enough to be standing on the wrong end trying to guess what's coming next, which is what Cody Garbrandt was doing over and over again with no initiative, just guessing. The full beat jab would touch Garbrandt, then Garbrandt would start to react. His reaction, him being a quick guy with good eyes and good defense, would key onto the second thing coming at him, another jab as it appeared, and then the right hand would just crack him across the fucking chin, while he thought he was reacting to the second jab. And it's all about the fact that it is like fully half the duration of the harder, more meaningful punches on either side. So it's like Font just kept giving Garbrandt this sense of rhythm and then interrupting it or breaking it. He was like syncopating his combinations basically with these little feints between punches, which I absolutely love. Every time I see somebody do that, we talk all the time about feints to get into range and feints to set up things, but feints punctuating combinations is a real level of boxing craft. And Rob Font did that so well. And then as I said before, he, if he got Garbrandt reacting to the right hand, he would show him that feint, and then the moment he got him to react, he would just stick him with the jab. Overall, he did such a good job punctuating things with the jab. It was, it began exchanges, it ended exchanges. Whether he needed to exit or whether Garbrandt was exiting, he was just really happy he didn't have to put anything on it. The guy's out of position. You're at the right distance. Just touch him.
Garbrandt was, so keen to cross counter him. There was Font wasn't giving him the cues. He wasn't stepping hard onto his jab. He was just sticking it out there.
Mm-hmm. He actually did another rhythm breaking kind of thing. He kind of swaggered into the jab a lot, or kind of marched into it. Which is the thing you sometimes see like Thai fighters do, where he would just sort of, rather than, moving in a technically correct way, shuffling the way boxers are taught to do, he was doing the thing that boxers also do when they're at a safe distance and they feel in control, which is to just straight up walk. And he would walk Cody Garbrandt down. His weight would come onto his left foot, which would now be in the lead. And it would look like too heavily loaded for a quick little punch. But then he would just sort of fall into the jab. Again, not putting anything into it, just coming at the wrong time, like a second after the step onto the left foot that you would, being Cody Garbrandt, think is presaging a jab. Lots of little stuff like that. It's just basically like, if you're going to give Rob Font the initiative and let him run you around, it is truly beautiful to watch. And I really think this speaks to, again, a general improvement at Rob Font's game. I think he is so much more satisfied now, even than he was in the Asuncao fight, with just taking what is given to him. I think that has been the biggest growth in Rob Font. I think that's the reason that his numbers have gone up so much. His output numbers, as we noted last week, is that Rob Font didn't used to be content with just landing, mostly a million jabs and not much else. And now he won a 5-round fight doing that. Certainly there were good right hands, but I think those right hands presented themselves because he was content to just take the little snappy openings that were shown to him.
Generally because Garbrandt had to do things to react to the little jabs.
Yeah. Also he did a shoulder roll to a body uppercut counter at one point, which is like my fucking favorite boxing counter. That was slick. He found several fascinating ways to answer the predictable Garbrandt right hand. I really liked it, honestly. As far as one-sided fights go, it was shades of Whitaker Gastelum from the other week. It was an exhibition, and I enjoyed it.
I will say, like, didn't actually leave me feeling that bad about Cody Garbrandt's prospects moving forward.
No, I don't think he looked terrible.
Yeah, I mean, the one thing is that he looked miserable for most of it.
He did.
Again, as sort of I've mentioned about a few. I mean, obviously he was losing fairly consistently, but he looked gun shy.
Yes.
But I think that fifth round, when he actually started going for it, was a very good sign, because it showed that he wasn't fully locked into the Woodley anxiety closet.
Yep.
And there were lots of moments where he was almost doing really good stuff. Mm-hmm. Like when he started to pivot, and when he started to not pivot but strafe and jab.
Yes. Every time he did it, it worked.
Mix it in with tick.
Go on, sorry. Yeah.
So you could see the shape of a much better fighter in there.
And I have hope, because he hasn't been in the Tyron Woodley closet for long, if that's where he is. Mm-hmm. You know, he hasn't been there his entire career to an extent like Tyron Woodley. So hopefully there is a version of Cody Garbrandt that, like Rob Font, take a lesson from the guy who just taught it to you. Be content with what is given to you. Take the small openings, and the bigger ones will present themselves. Another thing that Asuncao did so well, that 100% was key to beating Font. Part of the hand fighting, part of standing the ground, but the main thing was that he jabbed with Font and beat him at jabbing range. And it was evident here that Garbrandt, there's a universe where Garbrandt could do that to Rob Font. Whenever he did choose to exchange jabs with Font, he landed hard and clean. He got himself to an angle. He's got a great jab. Mechanically, it's fast, faster than any other punch in his arsenal even. He just, only threw 10 of them.
Yeah, and he's got that left hook.
Yeah.
He could pair with it, and he just doesn't, because, as the pieces aren't there. He's, if you think of him, if he's going to be circling to his left and jabbing, he should easily be able to, pair that with the left hook.
Absolutely.
As he's going around the opponent. Instead, it was, you could see him just well, I know how I win these. I've got a big right. I've got to get the big right on him at some point. Mm-hmm. Just cycling through it. But, I genuinely felt like there's more, in many ways, it was a more encouraging, not encouraging performance than the Asuncao one, but you could see more of a complete fighter, despite the fact that it was, a terrible fight where he looked totally lost most of the time. You could see the pieces floating around.
It was a more hopeful look than, say, the third time he got knocked out by the same exchange. Yeah. We have to grade Cody Garbrandt on a sort of curve. And, I agree. I think it was, if not encouraging, he certainly looked better. I made the comparison before. He didn't look as bad as Gastelum did against Whitaker. He wasn't clueless. He made some good efforts. He listened to his coach's advice, though he struggled to do so. But yeah, I agree. Not terrible, but exactly the right kind of performance to showcase what Rob Font does well. And we didn't even talk about the wrestling. Rob Font's wonderful grappling, his refusal to accept bottom position at all times, which makes up for the fact that he's not really a fantastic takedown defender. At least he isn't until later in the fight. But Marlon Moraes, Cody Garbrandt, even Asuncao to an extent. Try taking him down, he will get back up. Yeah.
Did he get up from Asuncao, or was that the end of the round? I can't remember. I think he might have just spent the rest of the time on bottom, but
maybe. I'm pretty sure Asuncao hit a takedown at the very beginning of a round. Did he control him for an entire round?
I'm sure he took him down midway through round 3.
Yeah.
That might have been.
I think it was 10 seconds into round 3. I think he started piecing him up in round 2. Font came out charged up, ready to get it back, and Asuncao hit him with a jab and took him down. That's my recollection.
Yeah, something like that.
Classic Asuncao. That's why we love him, folks. But yeah, you know, a really good showcase for Rob Font, just like Whitaker Gastelum was for Rob Whitaker. And, yeah, I think, again, showcased ways in which he has gotten better while also just being a straight up exhibition for what he's kind of always done well. Okay, let's take a break, Phil. When we come back, I don't know, what else from this card are we going to talk about? Carla Esparza absolutely mauled Yan Xiaonan, drawing tears of pain from thousands of haters across the world. Some other stuff happens. Hermanson Shabazian. I don't know. Let's collect our thoughts.
There were a bunch of like weird upsets, like where people who I didn't think were any good, like were actually pretty quietly somewhat impressive. I mean, Jared Vanderaa, Oma Dumont.
Yeah.
What?
Fucking Court McGee.
Court McGee.
And not that he's not.
That was a little more understandable.
Yeah, but still, I mean, you know, it was still a revelation that age has finally come for Claudio Silva, and Court McGee, almost as old as him, was the man to deliver that message. We'll talk about all that, if only in brief, after this. And then segment 3, trends and techniques. Okay, after this. Hey everybody, thanks for listening to this week's Heavy Hands. If you like what you hear, please consider pledging to support the podcast on Patreon. Patreon is basically continuous crowdfunding. You sign up to contribute a certain amount per month to help us with production costs and the like, and in return you get rewards ranging from a mention on the Heavy Hands website to a question or topic of your choice being discussed on the show. We have a lot more in the works to reward you for your help, and we appreciate every contribution. No amount is too small. Just head over to patreon.com and find how you can help out, the only show dedicated to the finer points of face punching. Now let's get back to it. All right, welcome back to Heavy Hands. We are moving down through the Font versus Garbrandt undercard as promised. Let us start with, first of all, let me say, there was a bit of a theme, and I think we may touch on this topic when we get to, touch on this subtopic, I suppose, when we get to our topic in segment 3. There was a bit of a theme of like jab-based outboxings on this card, and I have noticed this actually more and more on recent events. It seems like the past almost all year, virtually every UFC card has featured at least one notable outboxing, which is interesting to me because, you know, it wasn't that long ago that I developed my revolutionary theory that MMA is the sport where a man who come forward win. So we'll make that comparison. Rob Font came forward, but not in necessarily your typical MMA fighter fashion. And there were some other ones that utilized similar techniques. But first things first, the co-main event, Carla Esparza, Yan Xiaonan. I was pretty excited for this. Turns out I shouldn't have been. I mean, I like when Carla Esparza wins, but as a fight, it was nothing. It was entirely one-sided. You want to talk about Rob Font getting an exhibition? This made Carla Esparza look like a future champion. It was so one-sided.
Yeah. Got to admit, this one really kind of caught me off guard a bit.
Uh-huh.
I think it's just very hard to keep track of the wrestling level in this division.
Right.
Because with Yan Xiaonan, you know, she's fought people who realized she was this bad at wrestling.
Wait, repeat that. I'm sorry. You cut out at regarding Yan Xiaonan. She's fought people who have
taken her down before, but I just didn't realize she was this bad at wrestling.
Oh yeah.
I mean, yeah, and I guess there aren't really that many gradations in the division to allow you to know that.
There just aren't. You fight a bunch of, you know, like Karolina Kowalkiewicz who have some moments as wrestlers, and then boom, it's 10 steps up and you get Carla Esparza and Tatiana Suarez, basically. Yeah.
He fought Claudia Gadelha.
I know.
Like, if this is the thing that I hate, is when people have fights where try and think about, if I rearrange them, would I be able to pick them would I be able to use my insight that I'd gained from the other one to pick like correctly? Just wouldn't be able to do it.
How do you mean?
Were like, if you told me like, Yan Jianan fought Carlos Esparza. Carlos Esparza used her wrestling and her famously dynamic top game to TKO her within the first like half of the fight. You told me that information, then you said, now Yan Jianan is going to fight Claudia Gadelha.
Yeah.
Who wins? To be like, yeah, Claudia should get her out of there almost like if Carlos Esparza can get her out of there. What's going on? Yeah.
Well, I mean, I think it does sort of demand you reevaluate Claudia Gadelha as like a benchmark win. It doesn't really change my impression of Carla Esparza at all. It's more a reevaluation of Xiaonan's ability to deal with a fighter like Esparza, but Esparza has always been this kind of wrestler. She is just one of the few women in this division who can hit a shot and then continue to wrestle until the takedown is finished. That's genuinely a pretty rare ability in this division. It's her and Suarez who do that consistently. And frankly, Carla's the only one who does it consistently because Suarez hasn't fought in years. At least that's what it feels like. So yeah, just hitting a shot and then continuing to, change angle and drive through. I think both the ones she hit were doubles, unless I'm mistaken. And it was pretty much she'd get the shot and Xiaonan would have a nice first layer and then Esparza would just hit an angle and drive through. That was that. I think it was honestly on the ground that Xiaonan looked really bad, which again, very shocking considering her performance against Claudia Gadelha, in which she was taken down in round 1 and didn't just get owned.
Right.
She almost armbarred herself in this fight, Phil. She almost armbarred herself. She just did not have any answers. I think she was like so hyper fixated on like specific tiny little things, like not allowing Esparza to fully secure the crucifix. She just kind of didn't notice that she was getting pounded to a pulp the entire time she was just fighting for control of one arm. She was just fighting losing battles the entire time.
Yeah, I guess, and it's also just that Carla Esparza has a better gas tank than Claudia Gadelha. Because, Gadelha took her down twice.
Yeah. Yeah. Carla Esparza is strawweight to Gleison Tebow, albeit smaller. And, Claudia Gadelha is...
Eric Silva?
Yeah. Yes. That's exactly right. Yes, she's Eric Silva. 1 round of unstoppable power and then absolutely dead in the water. Anyway, I like Carla. I always have. I enjoy watching her win. This was a particularly brutal win. And good for you, Carla. What else?
Can you imagine she retakes the strawweight championship?
That would be so cool.
Fucking rule.
That would be so funny.
It would be amazing.
I would love it. It just Rose just has like horrific traumatic flashbacks halfway through the fight as Esparza starts taking her down. I would love it so much. It's not going to happen, but I really hope it does, and I hope they make that
she's
fight.
got 6 in a row now. It's between her and she's basically, she can wait out a title shot at this point.
Yeah, it's her. I mean, who else is it?
Whaley is pretty much
that's it.
But if Whaley doesn't want to jump in on short, in the time frame, and for a rematch,
yeah, absolutely, go for it. I mean,
don't think I'll pick her, but winnable.
I see no reason at least not to give her the shot. She has more than earned it. And this is a woman who, arguably, by the way, arguably hasn't lost to anyone in the division except Ioana Jędrzejczyk and Tatiana Suarez. I thought she won her split decision loss to Claudia Gadelha. Likewise, her fight with Ronda Marcos, both very close, so understandable.
She's got a bunch where he's arguably lost a whole bunch of those as well. So
yes,
but yeah.
But if you like Carla Esparza,
very generous.
If you're in the pocket for Carla as much as I am, she's undefeated. All right, and give her the goddamn title shot. Okay, let's talk about the main card opener real quick. Jack Hermansson, Edmund Shabazian. Another contender for category of most predictable fight dynamic. Would you agree?
Absolutely.
You know, Shabazian is a 1.5 round fighter. I think he looks physically like he's more than capable of doing more than that. He just seems to kind of start freaking out when people don't fold. I think that's really a big part of it, is that Jack Hermansson got hit and decided to press forward harder. And Shabazian does not like to see that. He also doesn't like when that turns into wrestling against the cage, which really seems to tire him out.
Yeah, I mean, this is the thing. Like in the run up to this one, I was really worried. I was starting to get more worried about it because it's really the kind of base dynamic you don't pick against, which is young guy against old guy, and or at least relatively old shot-born guy, and the young guy's going to hurt him early.
Yep.
And both picked Hermansson to win, and then as in the run-up to it, I was just like, oh no, he's going to get smoked round one.
Hey man, if Derek Brunson can do it, Jack Hermansson can do it. The blueprint is set.
Yep.
This is just, I don't know. Shabazian is in so many ways such a good fighter. He's so dynamic. He hits really hard. He's got reach. He's got really good boxing fundamentals, especially by middleweight standards. I think he just, more than anything, it just feels like he bit off more than he can chew at this stage in his career. He's just not ready for the way veterans deal with adversity.
I think it's the whole, basically beating Brad Tavares has put him in a place that he shouldn't really be in.
Yep.
There's some concern that, as a Monteverdean aspect, he's being trained as someone who's just, going to fold. Credit to Hermansson to just kind of doing what he did against Vettori and just fighting down and changing the course of the fight when he had to.
Yep.
This case, just by rushing Shabazian into the fence, he was clearly just like, right, full forearm guard, just going to get in on this guy. Whatever happens, I'm not going to give up until he hits the ground.
Yep. And another connection to Carla Esparza's win. This is a thing that works against prospects for a reason, and why so many prospect losses happen on the ground. It was the chain wrestling of Jack Hermansson. His initial shots were not upsetting Shabazian's balance even at all, but it was his willingness to tack on 3 or 4 finishing techniques which play off of the previous technique. That was what allowed him to get Shabazian down. Angle changes, trips after shots, etc., etc. All right. Well, I guess there's just 2 more things I want to talk about on the prelims, which to me sort of tie into the Rob Font fight. Is there anything else to mention? I mean, Ben Rothwell has now guillotined 2 Barnetts.
Very true.
That's something. That's a thing.
It's a really mean matchup.
Yeah.
Mean.
If Stefan Struve was still in the UFC, they would have done that for Huggy Bear.
Yeah, that's true. But he probably could have beaten Stefan Struve.
Yeah.
Because Norma Dumont, Jared Vanderaa, really genuinely pretty impressive. Again, sort of out-fighting-y performances.
Yep.
Where they just put long strikes out there and kept the pace up and didn't falter. Neither of whom I really expected to have much of a chance, and both looked like Norma Dumont looked like an okay women's featherweight.
Yeah, you also have to take into account, however, the fact that Felicia Spencer, she's become technical, Phil.
Mm-hmm.
She didn't go for a single takedown.
Yeah.
How can that be? You're Felicia Spencer. You take people down. Like, maybe you want to get some time in, but for fuck's sake, involve the wrestling a little bit. She didn't. Norma Dumont went for the first takedown of the fight in round 3 and got it. I feel like Spencer had the Nunes and Cyborg fights and was like, I'm going to be a boxer now. It's like, like I talk all the time about divisions like women's bantamweight and women's featherweight being like throwback divisions that they are right now, where like men's MMA was, 15 years ago. And that is such, a 2001 men's MMA thing, is like Josh Koscheck, Damian Maia, like she's K1 Spencer. It's truly like it was that on the nose. She's K1 Spencer now. I found that to be a very troubling sign, but also very funny. But yeah, good for Norma Dumont. Okay. I want to mention quickly, Joshua Kulabau fought on the prelims. Most of you probably do not know who that is. He lost his UFC debut. His last fight, he went to a draw with Charles Jourdain, another would-be prospect that I kind of like for reasons that I can't quite explain. And then he just won a fight here against like a relatively unknown Chinese fighter who has a loss on his record, a stoppage loss no less to Zhu Rong, who is another Chinese fighter, a better Chinese fighter that the UFC picked up and showcased on the Zhang Namajunas card. Yeah, like this was an outboxing. Sha Yilan was the name of the Chinese fighter, or Sha Yilan Nuerdanbieke. I'm just going to say Sha Yilan. He's a big muscle guy. He looks like a fridge. He's not good at anything, but he swaggers and he hits pretty hard and he's strong. And Joshua Kulabau is like a terrible athlete who is really smart and crafty and seems well prepared for every single fight he gets. And it's just a matter of, is his opponent too stupidly athletic, or are they athletic and therefore too stupid? And in this case, B. Option B.
Are they just someone exactly like him? The case of Charles Jourdain.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. Sort of a weird blend. And yeah, just like Rob Font, but almost entirely off the back foot. This was, well, it's about 50-50. Such a good 1-2 fight from Joshua Kulabau. Jabs followed by feints to set up the right hand. Kulabau did a really great job of using the jab, again, not putting too much into it, just touching the opponent, and then keeping his eyes on the opponent and aiming the right hand. It was not a, like interchangeable parts 1-2, where the two punches just sort of fall one after the other. Not like a Nate Diaz style 1-2, where it's almost one punch. It was a jab that set up the right hand, which was aimed to capitalize on that setup. And he did that again and again. He defended a shitload of takedowns and popped back to his feet, also like Rob Font. Got taken down, but just refused to stay down. I thought it was a really good performance from Joshua Kulabau, and I like him. So I'm happy to see him get a win. Likewise, another fight entirely dictated by the jab, except the long portions when it wasn't. Damir Ismagulov, whom both you and I, Phil, are sort of fans of. He's a great technical fighter, former champion outside the UFC. He didn't look good fighting Rafael Alves, but he did jab the shit out of Rafael Alves, and it won him the fight. So another important lesson in the value of the jab, the boxer's jab, even in MMA.
So I also enjoyed Kulabau's mixing up the way the angle he was taking. He was either taking the inside angle for the right hand or the outside angle and for the outside low kick.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So whenever he stepped in for the jab, Nuerdanbieke was not sure what was coming and what side was coming, basically. Mm-hmm. Very nice.
Yeah. Really good switch-ups. And veteran style switch ups. This was not a fighter who tried things and then got bored of them. This is a fighter who had like 4 techniques, really. 4 offensive techniques that he just cycled through and played one off the other. Really efficient, real classic journeyman type shit. So well done, Joshua Kulabau. I hope you win your next one. And if you haven't watched his fights, watch him. If you appreciate craft and preparation like I do, you will enjoy them even as he loses. You will find them inspiring efforts. Okay, let's take a break. When we come back, we're going to talk about technique trends in the sport of MMA. We, as longtime hardcore fans, have seen many trends come and go. The most recent, of course, calf kicks, and we may be seeing that one starting to go already. We're going to talk about that and all the other ones we can think of, really, after this. Financial support is fantastic, but there are other, even easier ways to support Heavy Hands. Perhaps the best is by spreading the word. We know our fan base. You're all cool, popular people with serious social media presences. You're tastemakers and trendsetters. Okay, there are 1 or 2 of you that don't fit that description. You know who you are, but no matter what, you can always help us out by telling folks about the show. And you can also give us a positive rating and review on iTunes and Stitcher, things like that. We rely on word of mouth and positive feedback to grow and improve, so thank you very much for your time and your help. Now, back to the show. Welcome back to Heavy Hands. Let's talk about trends, Phil. What spurred this topic suggestion from me was, as I noted at the top of the show, a bit of much deserved and long awaited praise for yours truly. I'll go ahead and read the original tweet because it's not often you get to hear prophecy, read from by the mouth of the man who recorded the prophecy in the first place. But here you go, Phil. Brace yourself. Are you sitting down?
On with it.
All right. You're going to be amazed at the level of prediction on display here. Here's the tweet. Prepare yourself, fight fans. That should be yourselves. Shit. Calf kicks are the craze at the moment, which means we're in for a sudden glut of snapped shins when fighters start figuring out how to deal with it, which should be them. A lot of subject-verb disagreement in that prophecy, but I think you'll find otherwise incredibly accurate, as this got retweeted by friend of the show, Luca Bourdon, and in the replies to his retweet, friend of literally everyone who does anything related to MMA, Caposa, said he's seen 5 snapped shins this month, and that man watches all the fights, so I trust his ballpark count. It does feel like suddenly a really rare occurrence is happening nonstop. Some of that may be these things are getting publicized and brought to our attention more because of the Chris Weidman one. I seem to recall a similar sort of frequency bias thing happening after Anderson Silva's leg broke, because it wasn't that long after that Tyrone Spong broke his shin in a K1 fight, or a glory fight. And there was another one not too long after that. But this is really a spate of shin breaks in the space of a very short period of time. And I think what this is, as my amazingly prophetic tweet indicates, is sort of the back end of the trend curve that is the dreaded calf kick. Turns out, Phil, their leg kicks, you can check them. In fact, they may be easier to check once you're used to seeing them coming, because it's pretty much already aimed at your shin.
Shocking.
Yes. So Luca Bourdon is certainly very satisfied, because he is a fucking psychopath, more so than most who watch MMA. So he's very pleased, I'm sure, that people's legs are being destroyed by their silly, trendy technique. But it does tell you something about how trends sort of operate in MMA. Like, all of these things have been invented and addressed many times over in the past. There truly is nothing new under the sun. There's certainly nothing new in the cage or the ring. But, it's kind of interesting, like I can't recall the last trend that was as marked as this recent turn towards the goddamn calf kick. And, everyone has been throwing them. It is, and the commentators are constantly talking about them. And
I remember when people talking about, there's one that we haven't, because we were talking about this before the,
other trends.
Before the, you know what this is actually the most like?
Huh.
The oblique kick.
Ooh.
Because it's
very good.
The only one where it's the only other one where people are like, should we ban it because it's too good?
Yes. Yes. Very, very good
out
shout.
Of MMA.
And I think we can pin that one firmly to the chest of John Jones, the recently expanded chest of now heavyweight John Jones. Of course, Anderson Silva notably did it sometimes before John, but he really made it a staple of his game. And it was after he started doing it that we saw so many others introducing it. Yeah, those purring kicks, the oblique kicks, the side kicks to the knee. And you're 100% spot on. The commentators never fucking shut up about those.
So, I think from one perspective, it's worth thinking about both of these things as like what were they built to attack? I mean, apart from the leg, but I think both of them really rose to prominence because MMA became more of a jab and lead hand sport. Because the primary thing they are built to do is to attack a heavy lead leg.
Yeah.
I mean, in the case of the oblique kick, the ways of avoiding it are, pretty much you can just move your leg out the way.
Yeah.
As long as it's not braced.
Literally
it's
just put
quite
60%.
difficult to stamp on top of someone's thigh.
Right. Just put 60% of your weight on the back foot. You're pretty much safe.
Yeah. There's like a safe way of getting around it. And there's a riskier but more rewarding way of getting around it, which is if you can parry it in some way, you will instantly get the best angle and the most compromised position you've got on the other person in your life because they'll be on one leg and side on to you, as we've seen with like necessarily like an oblique kick, but with front kicks like Rumble and Gus and so on.
Nicholas Backstrom. Do you remember him?
Oh yes.
That was a famous one. I'm trying to remember the name of the guy who knocked him out, a British fighter. Mike something?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Why do I remember these things? Or almost remember them, as the case may be. Yeah, it's just like parrying a front kick. It's like, oh, this guy is now squared up on his tippy toes right in front of me. The calf kick is really...
Your nemesis Shevchenko is good at it. She did it to Holly Holm a bunch.
Yes, she is. I hate to say it, but she is. Yeah, I think it also takes advantage of, it's the increased, prominence of the lead hand work in MMA. I 100% agree. And that is another sort of kind of trend that I want to talk about. But, I think it's also, an answer to the other major rule of MMA, which is that guy who come forward win, as I said before. And, that is the way to catch somebody who is using jabs more than previous eras of MMA fighters did and keeping that weight on his front foot is a guy pressing forward in like a wrestly MMA hybrid stance trying to pump out a jab. Regular low kicks are just the same, honestly. It's just that the calf kicks are like no one's conditioned for them. They apparently absolutely suck to get hit by, and they just deaden like the sciatic nerve that runs up your whole leg. But, you can check them, and you can counter them, same as any other low kick. Like if you're gonna eat it, just throw a straight punch down the middle. The guy's on one leg. You don't even have to block the kick if you can hit him clean while he's throwing it. So yeah, that's a trend that takes advantage of a certain thing. Of course there are other ones that are equally as niche. As you said, the oblique, the purring kicks. There was also like the other most notable one is of course the front kick to the face. Anderson Silva did it to Vitor. And then Lyoto Machida.
And Machida also did it to Vitor.
But first to Randy Couture, the crane kick variation. And, gosh, I should have looked this up before because it was one of the funniest things ever. I think it was like a month after, because those two fights, Machida Couture and Silva Belfort, happened in a really short span of time. It was like the same month. And it was all thanks to Steven Seagal. And then I think...
Oh, yes.
like maybe a week after the Machida one, it wasn't long, Dong Hyun Kim had a fight where he threw, by my recollection, one of many phases, by the way, one of the most trendable fighters in all of MMA. Like a guy who just radically changed his style just because it was what people wanted him to do, or that's what he seemed to think. But I think it was against Sean Pearson. I swear to God, he threw 30 front kicks to the face, many of which landed, shockingly. Pearson really struggled to catch on. But there was a period there where everyone was trying to replicate that. It was like the calf kick. It was like a thing that clearly could have an instantaneous debilitating effect on the opponent. Which of course all MMA fighters are always looking for something that will lead to an immediate finish so they don't have to do all this fighting crap. And one which, like, everyone just had basically completely overlooked as a viable technique. No one was thinking of it as anything that you would want to waste time training. And, weirdly, we still see the front kick. I think it actually has kind of worked its way in, which happens to a lot of trends. Like, they really do work their way into the fabric. Rob Font hit Cody Garbrandt with one last weekend. Front kick to the face. We still see them periodically, and they are effective. It is like a very long-range uppercut. It absolutely has its place. But yeah, that was another really notable trend. I can't even think of anything in particular that undid it, other than, like, a few people just, like, getting countered. But I kind of think a lot of people just realized how hard it was, and the ones who really wanted to do it got good at it.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the thing, is that those things just slot into the arsenal of techniques.
Yeah.
Apart from teep kicks, which will never catch on, because they never finish anyone instantly.
It's such a shame, isn't it? It's such a useful technique, but because it isn't an instant KO move, like a calf kick or a stupid goddamn front kick, it is a shame.
No one ever got killed by oblique kicks. I don't know, it's weird. Like, Jeff Neal watched Lorenz Larkin just, like, deep Neil Magny across the cage. He was just like, you know what? I would like to never do that. I'm going to headhunt this man.
Who was it recently who actually does really good teeps? I'm going to think of it. I'm going to look through recent UFC events because I recall commenting on it. Rob Whittaker, when he throws them, does them really well.
And Calderwood actually is a pretty decent teeper. But no, there was someone that we were mentioning that just, like, has a really... She does have a surprisingly systemized teep game.
Joanne Calderwood,
about recently.
We'll find it, Phil.
Yeah.
We'll find it. If I go quiet because I'm incapable of multitasking, you know why. I'm really trying to figure out who it was that does these kicks. Okay, so another one we thought of, another trend. This one not as pronounced, I don't think. This is almost just kind of an MMA thing, but there was a first instance of it getting notice. Was wheel kicks.
Mm-hmm.
Edson Barboza. Within a year after that, JDS had knocked out Mark Hunt with one.
Oh God, yeah.
There was Vitor Belfort, Luke Rockhold was also the same year as JDS Hunt. And then a year after that, I think Darren Cruikshank, knocked out, old, what's his name? Man whose name I only really know because Mike Rio with a wheel kick. And then otherwise it's like Stephen Thompson, who just like naturally does them. It's not, a lot of them aren't trendy, but that's one. The only reason I really want to bring it up is that, since we want to talk about not only trends, but the meta adjustments that bring those trends back down, is that Chris Weidman was the harbinger of both the calf kick and the wheel kick being potentially not only high reward, but very high risk moves.
Because I was thinking that, like, because there's a difference between stuff which is like utilizable, so stuff which is really useful and stuff which is cool. I think Chris Weidman is the announcement to the world that something is no longer cool and you should stop doing it. So I remembered like something where some group of like mathletes in some kids class like started dabbing on the news. Everyone was like, all right, dabbing's done now. Mm-hmm. Chris Weidman starts doing a technique and fails catastrophically on it.
Yep.
It's done.
Trend's dead.
It isn't cool anymore.
Yep. They said calf kick on the local news. Everyone stopped doing it. It sucks now. Yeah. So it is just kind of weird. Chris Weidman in a terribly unfortunate place. He lost his title due to an ill-timed wheel kick. And, now he lost probably a good bit of, nerve feeling in his lower leg due to a very ill-timed calf kick.
We'll say another person who I think, you already mentioned him. Hyun Kim, I think, has a strong case for being someone who's good at erasing dumb shit from MMA.
Yeah.
Because like, his relentless spamming of front kicks. His increased love of spinning shit later on in his career, like he knocked John Hathaway out in a fight which he really wasn't doing that well in. The spinning elbow, and he was just like, oh yeah, this is how you beat people. And then proceeded to have one of the silliest KOs imaginable against Tyron Woodley, where he backed Tyron Woodley up into the cage and then sprinted at him and just spun straight into Tyron Woodley's only punch.
He literally leapt the back of his head into Tyron Woodley's right hand. Yep. Don't just do it because everyone else is doing it, all right? Don't jump off that bridge, folks.
I'd already keyed into like Tyron Woodley being the fence master at this stage. Yeah. It was one of the easiest, like, and I was like, oh, Dong Hyun Kim goes absolutely insane when the other person is backed into the cage, and all Woodley does is wait and knock people out there.
Yeah. Yeah. Some trends fall down very predictably. It was Cyril Gahn, by the way.
Oh, yeah.
Cyril Gahn, great teeper. He throws teeps all the time and uses them in a variety of ways, defensively, offensively, setups. He feints with them. Really uniquely good with them for an MMA fighter. And certainly for a heavyweight, Phil. Give some love to the only technical heavyweight.
It just feels wrong.
The only technical heavyweight who's also an athlete that can go 5 rounds. I mean, you can't be cynical about that, Phil. It's a miracle. The man is a miracle.
He can go 5 rounds. Rosenstrike thing. That's all we can say now.
Okay. Fair enough. Okay, so I want to change tacks. What was the other one we thought of? Is there a spinning back fist trend?
Yeah, and it died with Don Hyun Kim. It started with McDessie, and it died with Don Hyun Kim.
Yeah, maybe McDessie. Certainly famous, so famous for that move that commentators will not stop talking about it years and years after he has even attempted to throw a spinning back fist.
So yeah, it was also the spinning back elbow. It's weird to think of that there was a time where people like John Jones is an incredible innovator in MMA.
Yeah. Right?
Those years are really like a long way in the past.
Considering how like now after having seen it for 10 years, how stale his game really feels. All these moves are just kind of forced. They have to be there because they're John Jones' signature moves. Yeah, we were talking about that before, and it made me think of the spinning back fist, like the wheel kick. I think this is just kind of a thing that will stay in the arsenals of many MMA fighters even, because it has a natural place in fist fighting. They used to do spinning back fists in like old-timey 1800s boxing matches. Before the Marquess of Queensberry rules were instituted, which are the rules on which the modern rule sets are based, people would spin around and hit each other. They called it a pivot blow. And I believe the reason that they banned it is that it was too easy to fudge it into a foul pivot blow, so-called, which is a spinning back elbow. It was too easy to go for the spinning back fist and quote-unquote accidentally catch the person up short. But that one I think actually does just kind of like the front kick. It's not so much there's a really obvious trend of people jumping on the train just because somebody did it well. There's going to be a time when you're giving more of your back than you want to, or you need to sneak out of a corner, or you need to come up with a different follow-up to the same piece of head movement or whatever, a million different ways that you can flow into a spinning strike, as seen by very good technical strikers like Artem Levin, like Somrak Kamsing. These are fighters in kickboxing who do very like traditional boxing moves, head movement, defense, footwork, and incorporate the spinning back fist, or the spinning back elbow really naturally into the flow of those movements. But the big metagame one, Phil, that I wanted to discuss before we get out of here was aggression and volume. This has been like not a single technique, just a direction the whole game has been headed. And it's like the bar is just continually raised, which tells you, really should have told us very clearly, I think, even before now, there has to be a crest. There has to be a tipping point where a solution is hit upon to this. Like, you just can't keep having a new Max Holloway come around, 1 year after the next, just setting striking output records. You can't, you go from Nate Diaz to Max Holloway. Where do you go from there? How much further can you push running forward and spamming punches on people? And I think we are actually starting to see the other side of that. And this is very, very exciting to me. In fact, I kind of wish we'd just done a whole segment about this, and I'm sure we will talk about it in future. But I think we may be seeing, Phil, the first ever era of MMA outfighters, like as a major
part. About Machida era.
Well, the fact that it's named after one man tells you something about that era. It was a definite outlier. It lasted
one fight.
If it lasted one fight, and there was literally one guy capable of doing it. And it was at light heavyweight. This is happening across divisions. We are seeing, as I think I mentioned it earlier, we were talking about Cody Garbrandt. Every single event now, it seems we get somebody who just gets boxed the hell up. Somebody is walking forward, trying to throw volume, as you do. The calf kicks have been part of the answer to this, right? They are one tool that answers the guy who's running at you leading with his jab, as you said before, Phil. But truly just pivoting and jabbing, walking people into counters, intelligently moving away without running backwards into the cage and letting the freight train coming after you run you over. We're seeing more and more of this. Cyril Gahn, Jan Blachowicz, literally just like winning really impressive fights, largely off the back foot. Last week we had Junyoung Park did it to Fawn Nchukwu. Robert Whittaker, one of the best outfighting performances I've ever seen against Kelvin Gastelum. Kamaru Usman has been doing it to people. Surprisingly, the guy who we all thought of as, kind of a standard bearer of the new pressure fighting school, Justin Gaethje, took a turn, like we are, I think, seeing a broad answer to the uptick in pressure and volume. And it's, I love it, Phil, because I thought this was sport where man who come forward win. I was really sure of that.
I think we're seeing an answer to the to pressure. I mean, I think if we're seeing an answer to volume, it is also more volume.
Sure.
But I think the one thing that characterized all those fights is that the person on the outside, these are not Machida or Silva type defensive performances. The person on the outside is outstriking the person, like numerically outstriking the person who's coming after them, and often by quite a lot.
Clearly volume is still important, yes.
That is still the unbreakable thing, is that you just, like, numbers are still, putting up numbers is still very, very important, and just something you kind of have to do.
Of course.
I mean, Zane wrote a very good, that son of a bitch, wrote a very good article about this, where he was talking about, things like, Khabib, and even, I think, GSP. Basically, the longer people have gone in their careers, generally, and if they've been successful or, championship level fighters, the higher numbers they're putting up.
Yeah.
If you look at Jose Aldo, he is throwing more in these later fights now that he is, very clearly on the downslope. He's throwing much more than he did when he was when he was champion, right, and when he was in his prime.
Yeah. Even, his most outfightery performance was surely the rematch with Frankie Edgar.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to check Fight Metric real quick and see how many he threw against Edgar.
That was a very controlled fight. That was a lot of, singular right hands and stuff.
He still threw 192. Not as many as Edgar. Jesus. It was genuinely a rare one where he didn't throw as many as his opponent because he's Jose goddamn Aldo. Kyler Phillips was another guy who did it recently really well that I forgot about, who beat Song Yadong with a fantastically consistent outfighting performance. So I don't know. I love it, Phil. I really thought, I should have known. I think this is a nice perspective change to have this thought that every single trend will crest and fall down again. There will be an adjustment, and it will be an adjustment that people have hit upon before. And this did happen, in boxing, I think. You can look at the so-called black code fighters, the murderers row of black American fighters who fought each other like dozens of times apiece, and very, very few of whom ever got a well-deserved crack at a world title. Archie Moore only got his because he waited until he was 36, and was still fighting. But those guys were I think boxing at the time that they came onto the scene was very similar. Fights were insane, incredibly violent. There were people fighting in the mold of Terry McGovern. This is later than Terry McGovern, of course, but Harry Greb, literally known as a windmill, would just buzzsaw people. And these fighters had to come up with a way of mitigating that. And so they figured out a way to match volume and be violent ass fighters while being defensively responsible and elusive. I love that I'm now convinced of this. So if I'm wrong, somebody point it out to me and give me a good reason why. But I'm very excited at the prospect of seeing a generation of guys who can fight going backwards and sideways. It's
I think that's the big change. I think volume here to stay for the time being.
Yes.
I think we're going to get low-paced, consistent MMA fights at the top level for a long time. Yeah. But the ability for people to fight on the back foot, definitely, definitely seeing it more at the I guess the grassroots of the UFC.
Yeah.
There's still, if we look at top level, the historically, I guess, and it's probably not true anymore, but if you look at the top level of the best divisions at the moment, they are still largely populated by absurdly overtuned offensive powerhouses.
Yes.
Like, if you want to pick someone at lightweight, I guess, you know who really bucks the trend? It's Volkanovski.
But also,
but if you look at lightweight, anyone is perfectly, you can have a pick for who you would think is going to become lightweight champion out of like 4 people. You're totally right. You have an utterly valid take, because any one of them could just blow one of the others right out the water.
Yeah.
The same is probably true of most of the top of featherweight, with, as I said, the exception of Volkanovski, and probably in bantamweight as well.
Hey, Brian Ortega may be an exception now too. That is a man who has recently remade himself in the mold of an outfighting boxer.
Yep. An interesting one to keep an eye out. For.
Josh Emmett did it against Shane Burgos. We didn't see that turn coming. You least of all, Phil. But we do also have champions Jan Blachowicz, Israel Adesanya, Kamaru Usman has recently taken a turn in this direction. I think it's a thing we have often seen champions hit upon, actually, later in their reigns. Because it makes sense. Like, volume is a given. Volume to this day is very high in boxing. You can look at like the earliest boxing footage available, and it's super slow paced. You can literally watch, footage of James Corbett versus Bob Fitzsimmons from like 1918 or whatever the hell it was. And it's very low paced. Volume went up and up and up because it's just a thing that I think has to happen in combat sports. You throw more, you overwhelm people psychologically, you land more. But in boxing, volume is still important, but look how many great outfighters there are in boxing. It's a super viable way to approach a high output striking sport. And I think it's no different in MMA. I'm just really glad to kind of have that sort of demonstrated to me. Valentina Shevchenko doesn't count, by the way. She's not part of this trend. She's not part of anything. She's not invited. Okay. I think that's about it, for this week's episode. I want to do a quick plug before we wrap up. And I'm going to plug this in more detail later on because I have not yet had a chance to read everything in it. But friend of the show and Bloody Elbow contributor Chris Reaney, who also sponsors the MMA Vivisection with that bastard Zane Simon, has come out with a second volume of his book, The Fine Art of Violence, which features his illustrations as well as art from other artists who cover MMA, and essays from people like Sean Al-Shadi, friend of the show Schwan Humes, Julie Kedzie, Fernanda Praches, whose name I'm sure I just mispronounced, Bloody Elbow's own Eugene S. Robinson, who is really like the Nick Cave type, or like the Leonard Cohen, like not everyone knows him, but the people in the know definitely know Eugene Robinson, and he's got an article in this book as well, alongside Chris's wonderful artwork. So make sure you check that out, and I'm going to let you know some more of my thoughts in detail when I've had a chance to look through it further, but check out Chris Reaney's book. That's Chris, R-I-N-I, The Fine Art of Violence, Volume 2. Anything else to plug from you, Phil?
Not that I can think of from the moment. I would probably just second the Chris Reaney suggestion. I mean, he's, if you don't follow him on Twitter, you should do that. Mm-hmm. And it looks like another fantastic book he's poured his heart and soul into. Yeah. With amazing contributors.
Yeah. Also, Chris has great taste in music. He's one of the few people on Twitter who will respond when I'm talking about metal and also jazz fusion. So he's great. As for me, I put out a piece over the weekend, how Charles Oliveira knocked out Michael Chandler. Pretty short and sweet, but I got a chance to talk about sort of left hooks as a concept. I got a chance to talk about why you shouldn't back up in straight lines. while also touching on a topic I honestly rarely mention, which is keeping your hand by your chin after punching, which also played a part in that knockout, and several other factors as well. So make sure you check that out. It's called How Charles Oliveira Knocked Out Michael Chandler. Straightforward title, straightforward article. I hope you like it. Otherwise, find us on social media. Twitter, to be specific. Phil is at Evil Greg Jackson. I am at Boxing Bush, BUSCH. Check out